Everybody, Invisiblekatana here, doing my review for Shazam! Fury of the Gods. There will be spoilers in the second half, as the title says, but I will let you guys know when we get there. This is actually my first review in like a full week since the whole crazy laptop situation. I'm sure none of you actually care, but it's relevant to me. First review I'm doing back. Figured I'd do this before catching up on all the other stuff because I actually just got back from the movie, because last week I was just like, I was kind of tired and I just didn't end up going to see it. And I'll be honest, I wasn't super excited to see it. I wasn't like losing my mind. I was just kind of like, I want to see it. Nothing from the trailers really made me think like, man, I can't wait to see it. I was like, I'm sure I'll enjoy it, but I was just kind of like, like none of the stuff as far as, I mean, let's face it, this and the Flash are in like a really weird position where it's just like, maybe next movie, maybe there is a next movie, maybe they're still here, maybe they aren't, who the F knows. I think they're keeping Flash, but even that, like everything's just weird and up in the air right now. So that didn't affect me at all as far as wanting to see it. It was genuinely just like, I was just kind of like, I want to see it, but last week was insane with the laptop stuff, and then I had a tire pop, and it was just like, this week is just, I just need like a down day. I was like kind of gonna be late, and I was like, I'll just see it next week. So that's what I did, and I just got out of it. It was fun. I actually enjoyed it. I still think I like the first movie more, but I think it's because the first movie was super funny. I felt like that movie had less of the classic formula because it was more, it was one of those movies where it's like very meta because they talk about superheroes, and it's like his brother / best friend is like, all right, well, hey, I know superheroes. You just became a superhero. Let's go figure this stuff out. Like, I'll teach you how to be the hero that you are and stuff like that. So it was really funny. And then, the action was still good and stuff, but it was really funny. And it was very heartfelt, especially there's like one particular scene that was just like, I remember when I first saw that, I was like, holy crap, from the first movie. I guess I can spoil it. We're talking about the second, but the scene with his mom where she didn't even remember that she gave him like the little compass and the ball. I was like, when I first saw that, I was like, this is super sad. Like, it was super effed up. So I was like, all right, that one really hit me. Here's a random thing just to be extra sad. Shazam, back when he like originally came out, the superhero version, when Billy would obviously say Shazam and turn into the hero version of him is what he imagined his father to look like, who obviously wasn't there because he took off. So there's another random sad thing about Shazam. That was like the legit backstory. I don't know if that's still a thing anymore, but that was legit. The backstory was like, he looks like what he imagines his dad looks like, who's not there because he's an orphan. I was like, cool. Like, I don't know why they did that, but it was like, that's effing dark. Anyway, I enjoyed the movie. I just don't think I enjoyed it as much as I did the last one. I can't say that I like the villain more in the first movie. I probably like, I like his family dynamic, like the scene where he like first summons the demons and like kills his dad and stuff. Like, that was super dark. So I really enjoyed that. I think he had a better story as far as like just how crappy he felt as a person, and like he was pushed so far as a child and just hated on so much by his brother and his father, and everything was his fault. Like, they had that whole flashback. It made him more entertaining, at least as far as what he did to other people. Like him himself, as far as the villain, was just like, okay, he's the villain, he got the powers and they fight. But what he did to his own family was like, well, that's really entertaining. Like, that was very interesting. And they kind of have that similar in this, where it's another family dynamic thing, kind of on both sides. Because of course, the first movie, he's alone. This movie, we have the whole Shazam family, which we get at the end of the first one, which was another insane surprise at the end of that first movie. So the first one had just a whole bunch of stuff where it was like, I didn't see that coming. That emotional beat was way harder than I thought. The scene where they kill the people in the office is intense. That's still an intense scene from that first movie where everyone talks about it, where it's like, that was like really pushing that PG-13 rating to like real close to R. Like, that junk was dark. And then it'll have a really intense moment like that I can think of. The heartfelt stuff, it's kind of permeated throughout. Like, that's kind of the whole point of the story. So it doesn't hit as hard as like that one specific scene in the first movie with his mom. It's just kind of, throughout the whole film, that's kind of the point, is like the family dynamic of them, being a family and growing apart despite being superheroes and wanting to keep things together, and just how all of that can play out. And then obviously villains come in and they happen to be related as well. And so I was like, all right, it's definitely fun to watch. I like how they handle a lot of the magic stuff within this, like them expanding on like the Rock of Eternity and them actually being in the cave and kind of hanging, which is what they do in the comics. So I personally like that. Even though I hadn't read it, I know about some of the stuff they do. And I was like, this is actually really cool. Like, we actually see them hang out and explore. It's not just like, oh, he goes to this cave and here are these statues of demons from the first movie, and here's just some chairs. It's like, no, they actually hang out. They make it like an arcade. they go and they have like all sorts of stuff that they do. Like everyone has their own thing where it's like, I like this specific thing in magic. I like this specific thing that I like to look into. So I like the way they handled that for sure. I thought that was really entertaining. And then, just the way they would handle them being superheroes and stuff like that. And Billy trying to, be the leader. Like, all right, this is what I have to do. And this is how things have to play out. And the villains come in and obviously think they're real crazy. It ties into the first movie, which I thought was a very interesting way to do that. They also make a really good joke about it because I was like, it was funny how they did it. And I'll talk about it in spoilers, of course, but I was kind of like, I kind of agree with him. Like when he explained it, I was kind of like, he has like a small point, at least a little bit of a point with why things ended up going the way that they did. And it was really funny to me because I was like, I can't really hate him. Everybody was mad, but I was like, I kind of see where he's coming from, at least a little bit. But I do like how they handled the villains. They were just kind of simple. There's, like there wasn't really much to them. It was like, this is our mission and this is what we're doing. They have like a family dynamic that isn't really like, technically it's explored because obviously they have to. They're the villain characters. They do at least get a little bit of depth, and it's kind of the same thing as in the first movie, like I said, except it's I'd say it's more even. Like, because the characters are actually together a lot. It's not like this guy who hates his brother and hates his father. It's like these women are actually just sisters. And that's just how it is. They're just there as the villains as a team, throughout the film. And obviously they have different personalities and stuff, but it was like, okay, let's kind of see how this plays out. And it was kind of okay. It was also like somewhat formulaic in a bit of a sense. Like, I'm sure some people could probably see some stuff coming, just the way things were kind of playing out, especially, as it heads towards the end of the movie. But overall, I still enjoyed it. I know it's making like not the best of reviews, but I didn't hate it at all. I was like, I enjoyed it. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the first one, which I still consider that to be my favorite of like the DC EU movies. Not that that means anything anymore, but I just consider that to be like my number one. And then oddly enough, probably Justice League, obviously the Zack Snyder version. Like the original one, I was like, it's fine. But the Zack Snyder version, I actually really enjoyed that one. And then probably Wonder Woman after that, or maybe Man of Steel. I actually liked that when it came out, except for the scene with his dad. I don't think anybody likes that, or it's just like, just run real fast. It just didn't make sense. But anyway, thought it was a good movie. I feel like that's all I can really say without getting into spoilers. I think it's worth checking out, especially if you like the first one. I think you will still enjoy this one. It's just that it's not as funny. I feel like that's the main thing. That's what the first Shazam movie truly had, was that it's a comedy movie that was a superhero movie. And this just felt like a superhero movie that had some comedy in it. It really felt like there was a definite switch in how they wrote things. And it kind of makes sense with it going, especially considering it was like, all right, well, we ended the first movie with the whole family having powers. So it's a little hard to get away from that, because it almost feels like you're a little bit wasting the characters if you don't go into a more formulaic sort of superhero story. But I feel like they still could have done it, even if they didn't focus on the other kids, which I will say they do spend a lot more time with them than I was expecting, because even though they all have powers, I did think they were going to be like, all right, here's like, obviously Billy matters, his brother matters, because they were like the two main kids from the first movie that mattered, and then maybe like one of the other kids, and that was about it. And so they don't really do that. Everyone actually does get kind of a fair shake in this movie, and that I really enjoyed, because I was like, okay, you actually get to see the characters talk about things as a team. Individually is like, all right, like I said, each character, what they pretty much care about as far as the magic stuff is concerned. Like, not everyone's just like, everything magic is amazing. It's like, this person wants to do this thing, this person kind of knows about that stuff. So I like the way they handled that. Definitely a lot of great jokes in there. There's some writing jokes that I absolutely loved, so that was really fun. But I think all in all, it was definitely a good movie. I think it's worth checking out. I don't understand why it would probably get such low reviews, but I actually thought it was fun. I thought it was definitely, I would say this, watch this over Black Adam. I enjoyed that too, but that was definitely like, that was like the super formulaic action movie where it almost didn't even have as much plot as this did, despite probably having just as many characters, having the Justice Society and all that stuff. But I like this way more than I like that, because I still felt like the story was entertaining. It's just that it wasn't super, super funny. And then boom, you get hit with the heartfelt stuff. It did feel a bit more formulaic and more like, okay, it's a superhero movie. Like, some of the elements that played into it was kind of like, all right, I feel like I've seen this stuff before, as where with the first one, despite like, every superhero on Earth being an orphan, they definitely touched on some different elements of that, considering he's still a kid who's an orphan. And in this, they don't really touch on that nearly as much, as far as like him, kind of bonding with the families of I feel like they used all that in the first movie, and in this, it's kind of just like, all right, it's just they're a family as superhero kids. And it was just like, it doesn't feel like they really pull on it as much as they possibly could except for like a couple of moments here and there, which mostly gets towards like the end of the film where things, you know, obviously get super serious. So it's like, I wish they kind of touched on that a bit more, outside of just having, you know, there's maybe like 1 or 2 actual sequences where they really even talk about it, aside from, you know, going towards the end of the film. So I wish they touched on that a lot more, because that was good as far as the heartfelt stuff. And I just wish it was as funny as the first one. Definitely got a lot of great jokes in here, but I was just like, man, maybe it was just the dynamic of it all being super meta and stuff like that, and having a kid who's super nerdy talking about heroes and, you know, kind of teaching someone else how to be a hero. Something about that, it just kind of felt like it worked in a different way that was, you know, much more unique than what we got in this. Though that doesn't make it a bad movie at all. I still think it was definitely enjoyable, but it was like something about like just that spark, you know, I guess that's the best way to put it. Like that spark, just not there as much, but definitely still there. I still enjoyed it. We'll see what happens. I don't think there's been any official news as far as if they're keeping Shazam or not keeping him. I hope they do, because they got a family of kids that are superheroes. Like there's so much they can do with that, but at the same time, there was so much they could have done with an entire universe that they've completely wiped out. Like we didn't even see Batgirl or Batwoman. No, it's Batgirl. Yeah, we didn't even see that movie. So it's like who knows what's gonna happen? But I hope it keeps going. I always love Shazam. But you know, hey, we'll see what ends up happening. So as far as the film, I say check it out. That's all I can say. I think it's still pretty good, just not as good as the first one, but definitely still good, still up there. Which, yeah, I hate to say that. That's not saying much considering all of the DC films that we've gotten so far, but I still think it's up there. I do think it's definitely an enjoyable film. So we'll see what happens with Aquaman as far as the sequel, because the only other person that got anything was Wonder Woman, and that sequel wasn't great. So, you know, Shazam got 2 good movies. We at least got that. He at least got just 1 was great, 2 is really good. We'll see what Aquaman does. Hey, it is what it is. It might not even make a difference, but I think it's worth checking out. So getting into spoilers, first thing I have to touch on, they reference the fact that he's called Captain Marvel. They do it at the end where they all call him different names. And there's this old guy who, if you wonder, like, why is this random old dude here? He has to be one of the creators, had to have been one of the original creators of Shazam / Captain Marvel. That's what he was called. That's why that guy says that, because initially Shazam was Captain Marvel. Then those guys got absolutely screwed over because DC sued them. And so they couldn't use Shazam because they're like, he copies Superman. Shazam was like way sweeter than Superman. I think I talked about this in my last review. Shazam was like selling twice as many comics as Superman. And they were like, he's stealing all this stuff. And it was like, he can do way more than Superman. Like Superman couldn't fly originally. Like Shazam could fly though. Like all the heat vision, laser vision, none of that. That's why the whole speeding train and jumping, you know, leap a tall building in a single bound, that was legit. That's all he did. He ran fast and he jumped real high. And he had super strength, obviously, but that was it. He could not actually fly. He didn't have the heat vision, cold breath, all the extra stuff. None of that was there. He had 3 things and that was it. And then Shazam came in. He had those 3 things plus a little extra. And then the cool story of him being a kid. And then they sued the F out of them and they just didn't have the money to, it was something about they didn't have the money to fight. You can look all this information up. It's really crazy. But because of that, they just couldn't make the comic anymore. They like basically didn't have the money to do it. And then I think they also lost the rights after that because DC was like, oh, they can't make that comic. Well, I guess we'll buy it now. And that's pretty much why Shazam is in DC. So it's super effed up, but they really screwed those guys over. But I think I would assume that that's one of the original creators. That's why he was wearing that outfit, because that is the original costume of Billy Batson, where he has the red shirt and then like the yellow stripes at the edges. So I thought that was super cool. And I'm calling him Captain Marvel. I was like, oh, you know, it's a great reference. And it was some random old dude. It just had to be one of the creators. That's what I always assume. So I believe that that's what that was. So it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's like a Bill Finger moment, if you know what I mean by that. So I appreciated that just as a random thing that I know about nerd comic stuff. But I love what they did with the character in this, as far as having the family, having all of them be different and have like, you know, his one brother was like mapping out all the different doors. His other brother just never told them about the library. I thought that was super weird, but it was a cool moment. And then they just have a pen named Steve, and the joke where he's like, yeah, especially when they specifically said it, where it was like, hey, should we proofread this? Nah, Steve just writes everything you say. Like they even said it in the thing. It's like, nah, he just writes whatever you say. We're good. And then they just sent it off. And I was like, that was actually really funny. So I really enjoyed that, but I like how they handled everything. I feel like a part of what I mentioned as far as them not touching on kind of like the serious family dynamic is like they had like 3 parts I felt in the whole movie where it was like, here's this serious moment about like the Billy aging up, they literally reference it one time where it's like, hey, you're almost 18. And it's like, hey, him talking to Mary, and she's like, I'm 18 and I grew out of them basically getting checks for me. And, I want to contribute. And then eventually they're going to stop getting checks for you and stuff like that. And that was super early in the movie. And they just don't touch on it until like the very end where it's like, hey, I know I'm aging out soon. And then it's like, hey, you're my son. And they, kind of reference it early where he calls her Rosa. And then he says, I love you, Mom, at the very end. And it was just like, I wish they touched on that, because that was a huge, that's such a big deal because of the whole fact that, hey, this kid was an orphan. He literally had his mom just be like, what the F is this stupid little thing? It's like, that was super sad. I think I actually cried when I first saw that because I was so effed up. And it was like, I wish they touched on that, because that was one of my favorite things about that movie was, like I said, in the non-spoiler segment, there are so many, heroes where it's like, oh, my parents are gone. It's either you're a Disney princess or you're a superhero. That's it. And your parents are just dead. One of them is dead or both of them are dead. And in this case, his father is, I think he mentions like his father was just gone. His mom just straight up abandoned him. And it was like, they had that there and they didn't really touch on it nearly as much because they had the other characters, I guess. But the way it was done, it was like, man, it's so weird that there's so much stuff where like the characters, get a lot of play and stuff like that. And I enjoy it. But there's also stuff where I'm like, I feel like they could have shortened that, or they could have changed a lot of stuff around and still had those moments, but then just add more serious stuff to it. Like I felt like there's a lot of moments where they could have easily just been like, hey, maybe have him talk to some of the other people in his family, like not just his older sister who already aged out and, has that dynamic where it's like, hey, this is kind of what's happening here. Maybe have him talk to his younger brother, or maybe even the youngest. Like everyone could have a different perspective based on their age and just who they are personality wise. And I felt like they didn't touch on that. It was like they mentioned it with the mom thing. It was like, give him time. And they mentioned him aging out. And then it comes back at the very end of the movie. And it was like, that's like hardly a part of it. And it was emotional because it was like, it was more emotional when he was straight up like, hey, I'm going to straight up sacrifice myself. But that had nothing to do with the whole orphan thing. And he does say like, I can die, but my entire family can live, stuff like that. So it tied in a bit, but I was like, man, considering everything that this movie kind of revolves around, especially considering they've done it twice. Because like I said, Mark Strong as the villain in the first movie, he had the family dynamic, but in this, the family's more unified. They have obviously fall apart by the end, which I think, like I said, we all kind of saw coming at least a little bit, where it was like, all right, they're together, but then Lucy Liu's character was always like kind of extra mad, and obviously, powers of chaos and all that. And it seemed like they were kind of working together, because they would get mad and, she would be like, she summoned the dragon and stuff at the end. It was like, okay, so, 2 out of 3 sisters agree, let's kill all the humans. Okay, so they're working together, and then Anna is just like kind of the odd one out. And then it's like, I am going to put a stop to this. And then she gets hit in the back. Helen Mirren, we'll just go with that, because I do not remember that. I remember Anna, Lucy Liu, and Helen Mirren. That's all I got. So, Helen Mirren gets stabbed in the back. Obviously, she like kind of dies, but doesn't really die. So I was like, okay, so she does actually end up betraying them. She turns, Lucy Liu turns Anna into a human for a bit. I was like, all right, that's an interesting dynamic. Like I said, kind of expected it a little bit, but I did think for like half a second, I was like, oh, they are just going to kind of go along with it because they had the conversation about hating humans and stuff. And then once that switch came, it was just like, boom, she's dead. And I was like, oh, okay, well, here we go. And that's kind of what I expected. But, they did kind of play the super long game, because it does happen very, like right towards the end, but ultimately it does happen. And the way they handle it was fine. I thought it was fine. But once again, the family dynamic stuff, I felt could have hit a little bit harder, just because it's like, hey, here are these 3 characters who their whole dynamic, like Helen Mirren has a great speech where it's like, she talks about like, imagine, you were robbed and then the people drop the money and then your neighbor keeps it. It was like, they have a whole dynamic there about their father being killed and humans being the ones that did it, which I thought was very fascinating. They really don't touch on that either, but I guess just, humans were there, gods were there, and stuff like that. Because she kind of blames humans, but I'm like, wasn't it the wizard? But they talk about humans like the whole way through, like what they did to us, and I'm just like, I don't understand how that works. Because all they talked about when they were like going through the scene where all the kids were reading the books, it was like specifically the wizards did that stuff. But they were like humans, like the whole way through the movie, Lucy Liu was just like, we should do this to the humans like they did us. And I'm just like, I don't think that really applies, because that wasn't them. I know they have their powers, but it's like, it had literally nothing to do with humans. It was like the wizards, unless the wizards, I guess, technically count as humans, which I guess makes sense. They're still humans. They just have magic abilities. So I guess that does technically count. But I was kind of confused by that the whole way through the movie, because I'm like, I don't know how it ties to the humans, but I guess it's because wizards, Merlin was technically a human, just a powerful wizard. So I guess it does make sense. But throughout the whole movie, I was kind of confused. Like, how does this tie to humans when they keep saying like the wizards were the one that took their powers? But all of that, being said, still enjoyed it. I still thought it was well done. It was just that the villains were kind of just okay. I don't think the action is as good in this movie either. Like, oddly enough, I think the first sequence where like they actually work together as a team was probably one of my favorite parts as far as the action is concerned. And I really wish we got more of that, because once they get into more of the combat, they do team up a little bit when they have like the little battle where Mary and, once again, Megan Good, which like half the people I know, half the people I don't. But when they come in and they actually help Billy out and they actually fight Helen Mirren's character, it's like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. But we just don't get a lot of them truly working as a team. I wish we got that. And obviously that was, a big part of the dynamic, which they don't really touch on as well, where it was like, all right, his brother's constantly going out on his own, but you could clearly tell when they first go out to do the whole bridge sequence that everyone else, like his brother who was like playing the game with him was just like, is it really, like, he didn't, clearly he didn't want to go. So like there are so many different dynamics of the team element that they just didn't explore. And I was like, man, I felt like there was so much time, considering the length of the movie, where I was like, they could have dived into that. Like, I feel like there's just some stuff that they went through as far as like, the characters have to know this because they got to know this about the villains, and we have to know these moments here and there. But it was just random things where I'm just like, man, I wish they touched on some of the more emotional elements, or at least the more personal elements of how things are working, because they would have all these things here where it's like, hey, here's what Billy wants for the team, here's what his brother wants, here's the reference of him kind of aging out and freaking out that he won't be a good leader, that he's going to get kicked out from the family and he doesn't really know how to process that. And it's like, here's a reference to that thing, or here's, the first mention of that thing, and here's like the second mention of that thing, and it's like 2 sentences long, and here's the resolution of that thing at the end of the movie. And it's like, that feels weird to even have it as a story beat, but to not really make it an actual part of the story. Like, it felt so weird, because like, this is really serious stuff, and it's like, here's 3 sentences and here's a couple more sentences, 45 minutes apart. And it's just like, that, that's the part that kind of takes that spark away, where I'm like, there's like the extra emotional stuff that was in the film that's obviously there with the character that totally, leans in from the first film. I feel like they should have leaned on that a lot more, because it's there, especially with the characters losing their powers, which I hate that they had that trailer where they spoiled it. And I was like, oh, all the kids are going to lose their powers until it gets to the end and it's just Billy. I hate that they put that in the trailer, but sometimes people just be stupid and they just put spoilers in the trailer where it's like, here's the whole film. And it's great. I definitely wanted to know that. So like, I remember seeing that trailer and just being like, oh, okay, so this is exactly how it goes. And then he fights Lucy Liu at the very end of the movie. It's like, and that's how the movie went. But I still enjoyed everything in between that. That was really good. The parents learning that they have powers. I wasn't expecting to end with the dragon just bursting through the bed. I was like, I didn't think that was how they were going to find out they had powers. And then it was just like this frantic moment, and then absolute chaos where everything goes absolutely insane. Demons sprouting out of these sacks, random dumb idiots in movies were like, what's this thing coming out? Like that first lady, she was just standing there and she definitely died, because that thing speared her in the back and threw her through a window. And I was like, oh, she's dead. Like, they killed a couple of people definitively. Like, the cop was thrown. I was like, he's fine. He hit the car, and I was like, he passed out. But that woman was murdered. Like, she was stabbed through the back with a giant scorpion tail from a chimera and was thrown through a window. And I was like, she didn't make it. Like, she's not a god. Like, she didn't get stabbed in the back and like wake up a little bit later. She's gone. Like, that woman died. So I was like, yeah, they're killing people in this. It wasn't as intense, as the first movie, but they killed some people 100%. Like the dude who got picked up by the harpy, I was like, he could have lived. Maybe broke his legs, but I was like, he's probably okay, just really hurt. But that woman's gone. She was dead and gone. So I like that. I thought, not her dying, but I like the monsters coming out, because I didn't expect that. I thought it was just going to be like, oh, the tree's growing and then it's just chaos and it kind of just F the city up. But then they're like, no, there's monsters here killing people too. And I was like, okay, that adds an extra layer. And then they're like, hey, unicorns are real, but they're super effing dark, which great design. I was like, these look super sick. They're just like dark demon horses with, horns, and they all like Skittles. Great line. Taste the rainbow, motherfuckers is a fantastic line. Obviously they cut it off, but that's a great line. That was really funny. So I like what they did with that. I like the ending where Billy was willing to sacrifice himself. Actually, he does. He actually straight up dies. And then they have the actual ending where Wonder Woman shows up, and it was just like, Yeah, we always say it. Where are all these heroes? Like, what's happening with all the other heroes? Obviously, Superman ain't gonna show up because of everything happening. They literally took out his scene that he was supposed to have in the movie, which is very unfortunate, but all of it is with what's going on there. But Wonder Woman showing up at the very end was just so weird to me. And her, I don't know if it was my theater, but I swear they played her music and I thought it was just gonna be like, and that junk was like, play the whole theme because she ain't coming back. Just play the whole fucking song. And it was blaring. And I was like, why is this whole song playing right now? She's just walking towards the spear. And I just thought that was really funny because I'm like, I thought it was gonna play, just do the little thing. And then it just kicked up. It was like at a 2 and it went to 15. And I was like, this song is so loud. And she's just walking. Like, obviously the characters were looking like, holy crap, it's Wonder Woman. They had a great moment with Freddie where he was looking, and then I think Anne looked at him and he looked at her and was like, oh, yeah, Wonder Woman. But I thought that was really funny. It was like super quick if you're not looking at him, but I thought that was funny. But I was like, why is her music playing so effing loud? And then she grabs the staff and then it's like, boom, yeah, I'm a god, here you go, here's some powers. And then Billy comes back. Cool that he, lives. And I assume that he's sticking around based on the 2 post-credit sequences that we got. Like, welcome to the Justice Society. I don't think that means anything as far as the Black Adam stuff is concerned. It was, once again, we'll just have to wait and see about that. If they retcon it, I'd be totally fine with that. Not that I hate the Black Adam movie, but if they did like Black Adam where it's like, no, he's just a bad guy unless he's here, like leave him alone or he'll F things up, which they, kind of went towards in the movie. And that is kind of how he is in the comics. Like, he's a hero to his people and no one else. But even in the movie, it was kind of like, yeah, everyone he killed is also like just definitively bad. There was like no, ambiguity about it. And then eventually he stops killing people even in that film. But it was like, he could just kill people. It's Black Adam. Like, just let him kill people. And then the Justice Society is still like, yeah, we couldn't beat the dude, so let's not let him kill people outside of his country. And then that's it. Boom, there's Black Adam still. Same Black Adam. So they're probably gonna retcon that. But the Justice Society thing was good. I like the Avengers joke. And then of course we have like the end with Mark Strong's character, and the caterpillar comes back and then he's like, yeah, I just got one more thing to do. And then he just leaves, and it was like, okay, so they do want him to come back. And they even referenced the fact that, it's been 2 years and stuff. So I was like, okay, it's considering they did both things where it's like, yep, going forward, Justice Society characters, and obviously the 2 characters that we see all this, and Peacemaker and stuff like that, they're, that's kind of sticking to, for sure, the continued canon. So Shazam has to come back, and I assume that means they're bringing the villain over as well, and obviously the caterpillar, who I'm not super familiar with outside of the actual ending of the first film. But it's like, okay, they gave him 2 sequences, both of which seem to say there is a future here for both the hero and 2 of his big bad villains. So I think it's safe to say he's coming back. I don't think there's been any official news. Also, who knows, with kind of the way the box office is going, they might decide to drop it because of that. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, though, I enjoyed it. I just felt like there was some shortcomings where it was like, there's so much emotional depth that they could reach into. I wouldn't have minded it. Like, honestly, if they went the emotional route, I would have been like, that's super cool. Like, that is great. It's like, the comic book movies that are just kind of just a little bit out there. That's why I think the first one has that, because it was really a comedy movie that had superhero stuff in it. And this just felt like a superhero movie that had some definitely good jokes, but it 100% was like, this feels like a superhero movie. And then the first movie was like, this feels like a comedy movie. And then there's like a couple of superhero bits where they fight a little bit. And like, that's how it felt. And this was definitely like superhero movie with comedy. Also, not a lot of action, not really a lot of superhero. They were in superhero form like 90% of the film, but let's be honest, they don't really do much, like, especially because everyone keeps losing their powers. They, like I said, they don't really get to be much of a team. Like, I felt like they were more of a team at the end of the last movie than they got to be in this one. Like, they flew around a bunch. Like, they definitely were next to each other, flying and talking and standing around doors and rocks, but they don't actually get to do like a ton of teamwork. They had like a couple of sequences which only like 3 people actually got to fight. The other 2 people were frozen and then were just out of the sequence, like standing on the street. It was just like, man, wish we got more of them being a full-on legitimate team. Hopefully we get that in the future. We'll see if we get anything Shazam-wise in the future without it being a retcon, but still enjoyed it for sure. I would love to know your thoughts on what you guys thought about this one. Is it coming back? Is it coming back? I would want them to, because like I said, I think I still really love the first movie. I certainly enjoyed this. I could easily watch this a second time for sure. Like, I wouldn't pay to do it right now. but I could easily see myself watching this on like HBO Max once it comes out. I was like, I could watch it twice. I definitely could, because I think the jokes are really good. I still like what they do with the characters. It's just that because of how much I like the first one, I think that's why I'm so critical on this. Even though I still really liked it, I'm just like, man, if they did more of the sad stuff, I think it would be a much better movie. Like, touch on the fact that he's an orphan, touch on the fact that he's freaking out. Like, they barely touch on it, honestly. Like, they reference it quite a bit, but they don't touch on it. And there's such a huge difference. They mention it once, you know, like I said, him talking to his sister, they kind of have it referenced where, you know, Helen Mirren's character is like, you know, you play the part of a leader, but you don't do it very well. They definitely touch on it, but it's like, that barely, like, they could literally take all those points out, the movie wouldn't change, like, at all. There's 3 scenes where they actually even reference it. And that means if you can take it out, it doesn't need to be there to begin with. And in all honesty, considering how intense the first one is, you know, as far as the emotions of his character, that should have been the main point. Is like, he's freaking out about being a leader, and it just doesn't play as well as I think it should emotionally. Like, it's not really emotional at all until the very end where he has to like sacrifice himself. But I'm like, they could have built this up. They could have touched on that. They could have had a lot of moments where, like, when he lost Freddie, they don't have much of a moment where he's like really in doubt or like super sad about it, or like he turns back into Billy. That was another, like, they could have used that as well, where it's like, he's not Shazam, like he turns back into Billy and he's just like sitting there as just the kid version of himself stuck. They could have done a whole scene on that, and there's nothing. It's like, all right, we got to get our brother back, and they just kind of work together and do it. They don't really have like a sad moment to just be like, man, what happens next? And I felt like they just kind of go through and figure out plans, which is fine, you know, led to some funny sequences, like I said, but the emotion of the character, they made it so important in the first movie. I find it missing, because that's what I love so much about the first film. Is like, as funny as it is, like I said, the scene with his mom, it's just like, that's effed up. And even the stuff they do with the villain, where it's like, it's just dark family stuff that happens, and it's so surface level in this on both sides, because they have 3 sisters who argue and are trying to figure out, like, do we honor ourselves? Like, do we get revenge? Do we just plant the tree in our own realm and stuff like that? They have all this stuff there, and it's just kind of like, tapping the surface of water. And it's just like, I feel like there's so much there. I'm just like, I feel like this could have been so much deeper, and I just would have loved it a whole lot more. So that's me, obviously, personal rant on that, just because, like I said, I think I'm a lot harsher on it because of how much I personally enjoyed the first movie, where I was like, man, finally Shazam has his day. Because I've said it for a long time, like, you know, Superman is Superman, you know, everyone's kind of like man on Superman, but I always love Shazam. I even just love, you know, the orphan story that actually tied into why he is who he is, and would like to have seen you know, a lot more of that. So still enjoyed it, but it was under the surface. Like, there's just a deeper film. I feel like that's what it is. Like, I could tell there's just a deeper version of this movie that exists somewhere. But either way, I still enjoyed it. Like I said, I could easily watch it a second time. Still 2 for 2 as far as I'm concerned. Still good. Still good. So we'll let you know your thoughts on this and my, you know, long-winded rambling. It's good to be back and just ramble and rant. But we'd love to know what you guys thought about this movie. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. I feel like no one cares about the first movie as much as I do. I'm sure there's some people who are like super hardcore Shazam fans out there, but if you really like the first movie, I would love to know your thoughts on kind of how they played it. Because like I said, a big thing that I felt was the fact that the first movie was a comedy movie that had superheroes. This was a superhero movie. It just felt different, it played different, and it didn't even have as many emotional beats as I personally felt like it should have, considering what they were, you know, trying to carry over from the first movie about the emotional element of like not really being a part of the family and all that stuff. And it's just like, you know, like, you touched on it, you referenced it for sure, and you technically resolved it, but it also felt like it was hardly a problem, because I was like, oh yeah, they kind of brought that back from like the one time it was talked about at the, you know, at the beginning of the movie, you know. So it was like I said, there's a deeper version out there somewhere. But we'll love to know your thoughts as a whole. And, you know, do you want Shazam to come back? Do you think he's coming back? A million questions up in the air. We'll see what happens. But either way, please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.